This will only happen in activity centres and not in other parts of the city. Parking restrictions already exist in many parts of the city, and we're going to extend these to better manage parking in and around our business and shopping areas. We don't want the sought-after parking in these areas taken up all day by just one car. We want to ensure the spaces can be used by multiple people visiting our shops, doing business, using our facilities, and spending time in cafes and restaurants. Of course, for some people and situations, car travel is a necessity. We're not stopping that. We're encouraging viable alternatives, because small changes can lead to big differences. That change starts with us. Victoria's population is growing, and more.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming at home. My name is Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon, and I'm the Mayor of Moreland City Council. I'm also the chairperson for tonight's council meeting. Our council meeting is for planning and related matters, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to tonight. We are meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people. We wish to acknowledge them as the custodians of these lands and waterways. I would also like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, as well as to other First Nation communities who make Moreland home. This council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available on video on demand, and gallery attendees are advised it will be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we are to act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support principles of leadership and good governance that secure public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, please remember to maintain safe distances between yourselves and others in accordance with COVID-19 public health requirements. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. In the event of this emergency, please listen to council officers and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. In attendance tonight, we have Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Adam Pulford.
Everyone.
Councillor Angelica Panopoulos.
Good evening.
Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening.
Councillor Helen Pavlidis.
Good evening.
Councillor James Conlon.
Hi, everybody.
Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening.
Councillor Oscar Yildiz.
Good evening.
And Councillor Sue Bolton.
Hi, everybody.
Councillors, are there any apologies for tonight's meeting? There being none, do we have any conflicts of interest to declare this evening? Councillor Riley, did you want to state your conflict?
Yeah, I have a conflict of interest by association. Oh, sorry, I'm allowed to take it off. I just want to say I'm very pleased to be back in the chamber in person and to see everyone else here. I have a conflict of interest on the first item on Victoria Street by association, so I'm declaring that this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton?
I've got a general conflict of interest on the first item, mainly because I know one of the residents. If it gets past one of the residents who would move in, while it's not a close friend, it's someone I have infrequent contact with, so I think it could be a perceived conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. And Councillor Conlon?
Yeah, I've got a similar general conflict of interest for the same application for 488 to 490 Victoria Street, based on relationships I have with some of the people who work there, who would move in there if the application was successful.
Thank you. Given that you have a conflict of interest, when we move to that item, I'll just ask that those councillors step out of the meeting and then we can return after the meeting has been dealt with, the item has been dealt with. Okay, councillors, could I please have a motion for the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Bolton, secondly Councillor Riley. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Before we move on to reports for consideration, I will outline how this council meeting for planning and related matters will run this evening. For the item in relation to the planning permit, the relevant planner will introduce the report and and officers' recommendations. I'll then give objectors the opportunity to make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints and concisely with your support or opposition to the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said. If you're opposed to the planning application, would you please inform the meeting why you're opposed to the application and suggest any alternatives? Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please also note there is a limit of 3 minutes per person, and as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. So the first item we have to debate tonight is 488 490 Victoria Street. And those councillors who are leaving the room. Yeah, I was thinking that. Thank you, councillors. I'll move to Vita Galante to present the presentation.
Thank you. So this is an application at 488 to 490 Victoria Street, Brunswick West. Apologies, I'll just take off my mask. And it's an application to develop the land to construct 10 dwellings over 2 stories. The application also includes the demolition of buildings that are non-contributory in the heritage precinct and seeks a reduction in the standard rate of car parking. The site is within the neighbourhood residential zone and is affected by 2 heritage overlays, one that applies to a precinct which is known as the Daly Street Heritage Precinct, and one that applies to both the subject site and the land to the immediate west, which is the former West Brunswick Primary School. Across the road, the land is zoned mixed use. In terms of the strategic policy setting, the land is designated as an area for minimal housing growth, where policy seeks development that respects neighbourhood character and enhances landscape character. However, as mentioned, the opposite side of Victoria is in a mixed use zone, which is a more intensive zone, and the site is less than 300 metres from the Melville Road neighbourhood centre. The site comprises 2 lots with an overall area of approximately 1,173 square metres. And west of the site, as I mentioned, is the former West Brunswick Primary School, which has been converted to a residential development and is of historic heritage significance. And to the east of the site, there's a right-of-way, and then beyond that, there's a childcare centre, which also has heritage significance as the former Progress Association Hall. And just to the south of the site, there are 3 dwellings that front Hunter Street. In terms of the proposal, it seeks to demolish the non-contributory buildings on the site. It will retain a mature tree at the rear of the site, and then it proposes the construction of 10 dwellings across 2 stories, which are 2 and 3 bedrooms. And there's also a central communal open space area of 287 square metres, and 6 car parking spaces are provided, which are accessed off the laneway. There are also 23 bicycle spaces, and the site has a high level of environmentally sustainable design, including an 8.3 star NatHERS rating. During consultation, 13 objections were received, with the main issues relating to car parking, traffic and use of the right-of-way and heritage. Consultation meeting was held in December. While no resolutions were reached, the applicant has agreed to a green travel plan forming a condition of permit to assist with managing the car parking and encourage the use of sustainable transport. In terms of the key planning considerations in assessment of this application, the site has a number of benefits, which include the retention of a mature tree, large communal open space, and excellent ESD outcomes. In relation to heritage, Council's Heritage Advisor largely supported the development but recommended a 10-metre setback instead of the 5 metres proposed. If adopted, this recommendation would constrain the development potential of the site and likely result in the loss of positive aspects of the design, such as the large communal open space. It's also relevant that a previous permit on this site had a comparable front setback and was located much closer to the heritage building on the adjoining site to the west. And the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal had previously found that that development would not impact on the heritage significance of the school. Council's Heritage Advisor agreed that this development before us tonight is a better heritage response than the previous permit. And on balance, council officers consider that the 5 metre setback proposed is acceptable. In terms of car parking, council engineers support the reduction. The site has good access to transport and services, being less than 300 metres from Melville Road. 23 bike parking spaces are provided, which is well in excess of what's required under the planning scheme. And the Green Travel Plan will further support the parking reduction by managing the use of the car park and incentivising the use of sustainable transport. For those reasons, it's recommended that council issues a notice of decision to grant a planning permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. We have 6 objectors who have indicated they wish to speak. Is Julia Binga here tonight? Okay, thank you. First, we'll have objectors. So, Louise Vecchi. Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay, thank you for the opportunity to address you. First of all, I'd like to say I'm not opposed to the development. I think the development in and of itself is good. My main concern is around the car parking, and I put that in my objection. The reason that I have an issue with the car parking is because I've experienced what's happened firsthand when the childcare centre was developed and it was granted car parking that was less than the normal standard. So what's in fact happened is that there's a lack of car parking access for the childcare centre, and what ends up happening is the car parking is then spilling out onto Hunter Street. As a result of this, and I've complained a few times to James Conlon, Councillor Conlon, and he's been fantastic in helping me address that, but the volume of the traffic down the right-of-way has increased significantly, and the speed in the right-of-way has increased as well. So if we were to see the development granted with limited car parking, that being 6 car parks, we expect that there'll be increased pressure on the right-of-way, increased traffic down the laneway, and also car parking will become more stressed in Hunter Street and also on Victoria Street. So they are predominantly my concerns. I think there's an existing problem that will only become exacerbated by granting this application with limited car parking. I think the solution would be to have adequate car parking at least at 16 spaces in order to ensure that the existing problems don't get made worse by this development. That's really all I have to say, unless there are any questions from anyone. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Is David Geyer here this evening?
Mayor and councillors, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity today to speak to you about this development. My name is David Guy and I live at 471 Victoria Street, directly opposite the proposed development. And today I represent 4 other objectors. Would you like to know their addresses or shall I continue? So prior to this meeting, I supplied my detailed response, and it clearly outlines my concerns and suggested changes to all the people here today. The three main concerns from Victoria Street objectors were heritage, parking and laneway safety. I think you'll probably hear a lot about the car parking, so I'm going to skip that. And the laneway safety is also being addressed by consultation away from this process as well, so I'll skip that. But the main matter that has a strong response from objectors is the heritage setting and protecting its importance and value in this part of Victoria Street. There are many concessions being made with this application, considering that the present setting is made up of a single-storey dwelling and vacant land, and set between two significant listed protected heritage buildings, obviously with the overlay. Any proposed building should be sympathetic and genuinely subservient to these adjoining heritage properties and not dominate or compete in this special heritage setting. Retention of the appropriate setting is an important part of heritage consideration. The proposed height is only a couple of metres less than the heritage building, so its vertical mass at Victoria Street spans approximately 26 metres in length, with a vertical height of 8.76 metres, with a 5 metre setback. And this is substantial, and we see this as an unacceptable response. Considering Council's own heritage advisor wanted a 10.5 metre setback speaks volumes to our concern, as it is a 5 metre setback that creates more visual height as you bring it forward from the street, dominating and affecting the view lines. The proposed building should not compete in their visual space that makes our streetscape so valued and special. We're not saying that it needs to be single storey, it can still be two-storey, but not at 8.76 metres high on Victoria Street. The floor plans can be retained, but the Victoria Street frontage should have a height of around 7.6 metres. The roof can then fall back to the intended 6.4 metres. This still provides a void space design feature and achieves the desired internal amenity. The southern block's height stays the same, as they are set well back from Victoria Street, so there's no change required there. In the agenda papers and even presentation just before, there was reference made to MPS 2011-747, which was the failed Westwick development, the final one. So for context, it must be stressed that this was a balanced development, either side of the east-west, either side of the school central building. So the school central building actually became encompassed and became a feature in its own right against two very modern architecturally designed buildings. So in summary, by reducing the height, you improve the view lines, you reduce the visual mass at a 5 metre setback, as the 10.5 metre setback, as preferred by the Moreland Heritage Council's consultant, was dismissed. You respect the heritage setting and provide a truly subservient building at the Victoria Street frontage, and what's more, the developer still gets to keep their floor plans. So in closing, far too often in Moreland, its history is being devalued due to developers continually treating heritage with disdain. The brickworks is a recent example I have followed. Residents have told me it has been a travesty what has been allowed to happen. Heritage should not be seen as a hindrance, but instead valued and embraced. These listed buildings deserve to continue to stand proud and not have to compete, in this instance, with a two-storey frontage on steroids. Thanks for the opportunity and consideration.
Thank you, David. Is Juan Seymour here this evening?
Hello everyone, my name's Ewan Seymour and I'm neighbours with Louisa, who spoke to you earlier. So I live in Hunter Street, which is one house away from where the laneway emerges between Victoria and Hunter Streets. My objection to this application is based on parking and the increased traffic down the laneway. Firstly, there's only 6 spots where 16 is recommended by the planning rules. There's no demand study that I can see that's been made in the application for why 6 spots is adequate. I can't see anything beyond there's public transport available and people can ride a bike. The development is 2 or 3 bedroom units. which I think are likely to generate a demand for parking. The Pioneer residents have good intention of not using cars. I would also say that there's no guarantee any future residents have the same needs or desires. We've seen an increase, as Louisa spoke about, with the childcare centre. It's caused an increase in traffic as well as an increase in the number of people parking there, and it's mostly staff members who are there during the day because their parking isn't what they need it to be. The application mentions that there's unlikely to be an effect on local amenity. I disagree because we've had experience that says contrary. The last thing I will say is I haven't been told about the green plan, the green travel plan, sorry. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what it includes, so I'm not able to comment on whether that would satisfy my concerns. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ewan. Is Michael Mifsud here this evening?
Good evening, councillors, neighbours. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Michael Mifsud and I live at 480 Victoria Street, which is just a few doors east of the proposed development. I did have concerns around heritage and setback, but that's been dealt with, and with parking, but I'm just going to focus on one aspect of parking that other objectors won't be raising tonight. It seems that every new development in Victoria Street seeks exemption from the guidelines around parking and are granted those exemptions, and we're living with that currently. After consideration of all the objections, the council report supports the grant of exemptions from parking guidelines for this development. This practice has hopefully inadvertently, but unintentionally, has consequences of reducing socioeconomic diversity of residents in the area. Many low-paid and insecurely employed casual workers and low-paid community and public sector employees, and in this I'm including even casual relief teachers, people who work in disability services, in aged care, are required to provide their own vehicle for transportation to work across multiple locations in their job. I know for the last 30 years, every job I've had has had that requirement, not highly paid jobs either. So I think it's probably a bit short-sighted. The parking provision in such developments contributes to the exclusion of people on lower incomes from living in Brunswick, and this is happening progressively across the whole area. The traditional working class residents of the area are moving further and further out of the city. People who are dependent on their cars are affected by such exemptions from provision of parking. Pushing people out also has further negative impacts on commuting time, fuel consumption, which are not very good for the environment. And we're supposed to be a very green conscious council, but I think sometimes there are inadvertent effects of the way policy is implemented. Importantly, diversity is about more than ethnicity or gender or religion or sexuality. It's also about socioeconomics. And what's happening is that we're gradually excluding people who earn lower incomes from living in the area. I doubt that such people would be able to purchase any of these residents under the given circumstances. It's a usual practice, I think, now in employment that people are expected to provide their own transport. I think 6 places for 16 residents is incredibly unrealistic. It's happened all along Victoria Street. We hear the same thing over and over again from council. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Michael. Last, we have Jeff Leon.
Good evening, councillors. I have overall I'm sort of approve of the application. I have a few concerns though. With one is waste recycling management. I don't think there's enough in terms of where the food scraps and green waste is going. There's no place on the plans to say where it will be or how they will achieve their composting and so forth. So if they could show that. Another thing is with regard to the bins. I think Moreland Council's on the way of adopting glass bins, and there's no positioning of these bins on the plans. They have the other bins, but not those bins. The second point is the number of parking spaces allocated to the development. I don't think that's adequate enough. Not every cyclist or public transport user, there's possibilities of them owning a car as well. So to reduce the numbers from 16 to 6, I think is inadequate. In fact, you really want to get rid of all cars off the streets and perhaps develop more cycling safety along the streets. If you get more cars off the street, that would, especially when this particular development is encouraging cyclists, if you get more cars off the street, that way you can have better safety in that street. By the way, I live at 37 Whitby Street, so I don't actually, which is one street away from Victoria Street. Furthermore, there's in the development, in the street with regard to parking, there is a vacant block there which is going to have a proposed development opposite it, which has got six units, 5 of which have garages. But whenever visitors or even businesses in the street, they would also need access to the street for parking. As well as that, I think what you could adopt is to ensure that anyone who resides at that residence, especially in the future if parking gets more congested and there's permit zones introduced, that particular residents in that street don't get extra permits to park in that street, because if that particular street, sorry, I'm a bit nervous here, but if that particular development goes ahead, it's sort of encouraging cyclists, so there shouldn't be any requirement for them to have cars. So if they do have cars, they shouldn't be permitted to have permits if permit zones are introduced.
Thanks, Jeff. If you could just finish up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great. That's all the objectors I have for this evening. So if Barish Belinda, speaking on behalf of the applicant, could speak.
Hi all, thanks councillors for having me here today. My name is Barish. I'll put this a bit higher so I can read it. I'm one of the members of this joint venture project who have come together to purchase the Victoria Street site. We are a diverse group of families, older retirees and first home buyers. We're not your usual suspects when it comes to development. We share a vision to create sustainable and affordable housing that contributes to the social fabric of our neighbourhood. I've personally lived in the inner north for my whole life. I teach piano at a local high school, Princess Hill, just down the road, and have done so for 10 years, and I'm passionate about building community. Others in the group are similarly community-minded, volunteering for scouts, running play groups, and participating in local sporting groups. We have devoted enormous energy to this project because we know these apartments will be our forever homes, where we raise our children and grow old. As such, we are mindful of the need to accommodate disability and other special needs into this development and are working closely with our architects to ensure people can age in place. I acknowledge that many of the concerns being raised tonight are around the transport dispensation that we're asking for. We've carefully considered our car use, so much so that we've had several lengthy consultations and discussions, and have come to the conclusion that 4 shared, and I got to emphasise that word, shared car spots would be enough for the residents. Having said that, we wanted to be cautious and we upped it to 6 shared spots to accommodate for changing circumstances over time. Currently, our group uses bikes and public transport far more than cars. Many of us also use cargo bikes or bicycle trailers to transport our children, myself included. I've been doing that for some time, and move groceries around in all weather conditions. When we move into Victoria Street, we'll be spoiled for public transport options. We've got the 508 bus just literally out the front of our door and the 58 tram a few blocks away. The Upfield line not too far away too. Of course, there'll be times we need to use a car. We're absolutely realistic about that. We're not seeking 0 car spots. That's why we're committed to making all of our 6 car spots shared with separate titles to be managed by the body corporate. Many people in our group already have experience with shared car schemes like Car Next Door and Go Get, and find them to be practical options. We're also conscious that most cars, particularly I suppose in this COVID environment, are sitting idle, particularly when people walk, ride or catch public transport. And in these strange times, work from home. So our model is a great way of reducing car spots while also ensuring everyone has access to a car when they need one. It also allows us to maximise the green space, which I think is a really good outcome in this project and something we're really excited about. We recognise that Brunswick Roads, Brunswick Road included, but Brunswick Roads, plural, cannot sustain more cars as the population grows, and are proud to have developed a balanced option that enables us to access cars when needed while continuing to commute primarily by bike and public transport. Another issue raised is the increased traffic flow through the laneway. We're hugely supportive of the introduction of traffic calming measures to make travel as slow and safe as possible. Our group is really proud of the plan we're putting forward. It's an affordable apartment scheme that doesn't compromise on quality, delivering above 8-star energy rating and meets many of Moreland's social and environmental objectives. We're looking forward to being good long-term neighbours to the community around us, and I'm personally looking forward to joining you all as a City of Moreland resident. Thanks so much for your time. Oh, do you guys have questions? Sorry.
Councillor Davidson.
Just in terms, you mentioned the car share and you had said...
6 spaces.
Okay.
When we were workshopping it internally, we discovered that 4 shared spots would be enough to meet our group's needs, but we've put it up to 6 spaces to accommodate for changes that we can't foresee.
And are those shared, like Go Get, like those kind of like...
We're looking, I mean, I think we'll be submitting that in the Green Travel Plan, and I've got our planning person, because I'm just a layman that's keen to see this development come up, but I've got a planning person there if you want to speak to the Green Travel Plan,
Yes,
which I imagine is where the documentation that'll hold some of that information.
That would be helpful.
Do I need to leave?
No, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thanks.
I'm from Echelon Planning, and I'm the planner working on this project with the group for the last, I think it must be over 2 years in the process to get to this point. So thank you for meeting with us today. Just in terms of the Green Travel Plan, that was something that was suggested through the consultation process with Council and with the objectors as well. So we've started that process already to work with a transport consultant in relation to that, and it'll include having one-on-one interviews with all of the members of the collective about what their individual needs will be for car usage going forward, and working through how the car spaces will be managed through the body corporate. So the idea is that it'll be a shared asset amongst the residents, and that I understand that the group will reach a decision on how that allocation will be assigned to different people over time. So it's still something that we're working through, but it's going to be fully documented through the Green Travel Plan, which will then be endorsed and be part of the permit. So it allows for there to be, oversight from Council as well, in terms of it'll be Council who then approves that document, and it'll be something that continues with the development over time.
Oh, I think I was hopeful that there would have been something concrete in terms of how this parking would have been operating, just given that it's such a significant reduction. And if you're looking at having car share spaces for like 4, and then the remaining 2 would be assigned to individual properties, like something documenting that we could see today would have been helpful for me. But I understand you don't have it.
It's
at this
still a
point.
work in progress,
So,
I guess,
yeah.
is probably the answer to that, and
Sure.
something that everyone in the collective is very obviously invested in investigating and ensuring that it's going to meet their needs long term, because I think the concern around future residents moving in and understanding what could be there as well is important. So it's all going to be very clearly documented and endorsed by council.
Just keep going. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he raised some concerns about waste and compost and provision for purple bin.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a really important part of this project is the communal open space in the centre. So it's 9 metres in depth. It's going to have a lot of composting and permaculture, and it's a key aspect of the project is having this working garden that will be, an urban garden that I think composting, and I'm sure that you can talk to this as well, that it's going to be one of the key items that the group, there's so many avid gardeners within the group, and composting will be definitely a lot of space will be dedicated to it. And I guess the thing about this project is that there's all these separate sustainability objectives that are all coming together to build this vision for something that is really not the status quo. So we're not just, this is not a speculative development, this is a deliberative development that's brought together these groups of like-minded people who are trying to do something really different here and achieve top quality sustainability outcomes. So composting and waste reduction is just one aspect of this that everyone within the group is very dedicated to. So in summary, the group is very committed to reducing waste, and that's why we have less bins and less storage, because it's not needed based on everyone's individual kind of needs and how they've worked that through together. Any other questions?
Yeah. Councillor Pavlidis, no questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Councillors, if there are no further questions, could I please have a motion?
Can I ask a question to the officers?
Yeah, sure.
This application is 10 dwellings. This application is 10 dwellings, so I assume that it's going to be subdivided into 10 lots, and therefore residents in these dwellings wouldn't be eligible for residential parking permits on Victoria Street. And if there's future reductions in Hunter Street, they will not be eligible for those. Is that a correct understanding?
Thanks, Narelle.
So if there are parking restrictions currently in the street or proposed in the future, residents won't be eligible for parking permits.
Thank you. Is there a motion from councillors? Councillor Panopoulos, and the seconder? Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Panopoulos.
Thanks. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Upon hearing, do we need the seconder to go through, or all good? All right. Upon hearing, all of the objections and the reasons why, as well as the applicant's perspective, I'm quite comfortable that on the balance about the parking reduction, that they've thought it through about what they need.
Sorry, your mask is...
sorry. Force of habit. On the balance of what was discussed, I'm quite comfortable with the parking reduction that was sought, because the collective has decided amongst themselves and they know their needs, and there's also the consideration that Councillor Tapanos just raised and just clarified that if there are future restrictions placed on the streets, they won't be eligible for that on-street parking. This is a development that I don't think comes to council very often. It's got excellent ESD ratings, an 8.3 star Nathurst rating, 23 bike spaces, and public transport is extremely accessible. And further to that, including forcing or to require that car spaces be increased, it does add significant additional cost onto the build of the development. And so that in turn kind of feeds into our goals to create affordable housing, in that if down the line, if the people in this development aren't still living there, future property owners and first home buyers, who knows, they are able to make the choice to save that portion of money for the choice of not having a car and being able to live close to such good options for public transport. And so for those reasons, I'm quite comfortable with the conditions that have been placed on the officer recommendation, and so I'd like to move this.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm satisfied with this application, and I think it should be supported. I think overall that it's quite a good development when you have a look at the build and the ESD elements that are in the development. I think the heights are appropriate for this location. Particularly, it's less than the heritage buildings adjacent to it. I wish that we could have set it back a little bit more, but nonetheless, I think you need to find a compromise with the setback. To have a full 10 metres is probably not appropriate for this site. I think that when you have single frontage or double frontage streets, heritage precincts, you sort of get that requirement to set back right adjacent to the neighbours. But I think in this very large site, the requirements should be something more that is a compromise, and I think 5 metres probably meets that requirement. In regards to car parking, my biggest concern is a safety element for pedestrians on walking across the laneway. I would have preferred that there wasn't 6 back-to-back car spots. Nonetheless, I think that there isn't really an alternative design that might mitigate that. And as a council, we might need to have a look at some traffic calming measures into the future to ensure that any adverse impacts on pedestrian safety is mitigated from the development. So overall, I think that this application deserves to be supported. There are, as I mentioned, a few things that I thought could be improved, but they are quite small in the scheme of things. And what is actually being proposed is quite a high quality development for Brunswick, and something that I think should be supported.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Are there any speakers against? Are there any other speakers who wish to speak in favour? Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo the comments of my fellow councillors, and also just to address the issue in relation to parking. Initially, when I first looked at this application, I thought it's too great a reduction, and I did have some real concerns around the lack of parking. But I think hearing from the applicant and the gentleman that's buying into this collaborative development, I think that this particular group should not be punished for the failures of the parking in that particular area when they've put so much thought into a development that's very deliberative. It's not speculative. I think that they've really put a lot of heart and soul into wanting to form a community in this particular location, and they've looked forward into the future. One of my concerns was that people's life circumstances change as you age. There may be reasons to purchase a car or needing more accessible transport. But I think the Green Travel Plan on the whole, even though it hasn't been fully detailed, I think they've got the right objectives in mind, and I'm very satisfied that moving forward, this is the kind of development that I can say wholeheartedly is something that I would like to see more of, given the intent behind it. So I really wish the people who have bought into this development all the best for their family and the communities they're creating.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. I'll now move to the officer to outline the next steps.
you. So council has just, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. So council has just determined to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit subject to the conditions contained within the officer recommendation. And following the issue of the decision, both the applicant and all objector parties will receive a copy of the decision. Objectors will have 28 days to appeal the decision at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. In the event that no appeal is lodged, a planning permit will be issued, and the applicant also has an opportunity to appeal any conditions of the permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vida. I'll also advise that Councillor El Halabi is an apology for tonight, and we'll just wait for the other councillors to join us. So the next item that we're discussing this evening is 5.2 Lily Street, Coburg North, planning application MPS 2020-367. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest to disclose? No, then I'll ask Mark Hughes to, is Mark Hughes tonight? Yep, to outline the next steps, to present the presentation.
Moment.
Where's the mouse? Where is it?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. I can talk without presentation.
We'll just try one more time.
Yeah.
We've got tech people coming.
No. Did it? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Perfect. To change the battery. Shake it up.
Thank you for bearing with me while we got the IT working. Thank you, councillors. I'm presenting the item for 8 Lily Street in Coburg. It's a proposal that seeks permission to use the land for a recording studio. In terms of the planning controls, the site is located in a mixed-use zone. You can see from that zoning map up there is many different zones that surround the site. So we have a park and recreation zone because it's a park. There's industrial zones to the west and to the south, and then to the north and to the east, there's residential zones as well. The site has a special building overlay which relates to flooding, environmental significance overlay, parking overlay, and environmental audit overlay. In terms of the surrounds, you can see the aerial image roughly follows what you see in the zoning maps. We do have some industrial land uses to the west and south. You can see the parkland directly abutting to the west, and then to the north and east, you can see the residential properties as well. At the moment, the site contains a warehouse. It's got hard standing at the front. The proposal doesn't seek to change that building at all. As I said, what's proposed is to use the land for a recording studio. The hours sought are from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week, and there's a maximum of 10 people on site. The changes to the building are really all internal, so there's a number of studios being constructed along with staff amenities such as kitchens, toilets, that sort of thing. There's some bikes parking and there's some car parking in the front as well. Following public notice, there were 17 objections received. The main issues relate to noise, hours, car parking, and concern about that interface with the residential properties. We had a planning and information discussion meeting on the 8th of February. The results from that meeting was the applicants agreed to modify the hours as it relates to the playing and recording of live music, so that will not start until 10 a.m. and will cease at 8 p.m. So that's an hour shorter each side of the day. In terms of the key considerations here, the officer's assessment has revealed that the recording studio is acceptable in the mixed-use zone. Again, I mentioned that the hours for the music have been modified, and with conditions, including the recommendation, there is no unreasonable amenity impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We have 2 objectors this evening, or potentially 3. Did Dario and Paula Gama, did Paula also want to speak, Dario? Can you let me know when you come in? Thanks.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Dario Gama, representing Dario and Paula Gama. This evening, we are the owners of 33 Guilfoyle Avenue, situated next door to 8 Lily Street. We noticed that page 90 of the document circulated does not have us plotted as an objector. We'd like it noted on record that we are and have always been, which means 7 of the 9 properties to the east of the factory are objectors. Our voice also represents others who are unable to be here tonight. Secondly, I'd like it made known that on page 77 neglects to mention that post that PID, the applicant agreed to restrict the recording of live music from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m, Monday to Sunday, and that no other party has agreed to those operating hours or days. We have many concerns with this application, and we've expressed that and documented that to councillors, so we won't be going through all of them this evening. We understand that it's important for Moreland Council to be promoting music and arts, and we're not against it. However, we don't believe it should be done at the expense of residents. Locals are fully aware of the factory located at 8 Lily Street. It has been there for a very long time as neighbours and next door. It's worked alongside the neighbourhood with that factory for over 60 years with reasonable operating hours. What the applicant is proposing is a significant shift to the current lifestyle of the residents. You are asking this business to operate 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, up to 9 p.m, which is a drastic shift from operating hours for a business located at 8 Lily Street and the surrounding areas, which is normally 5.5 days during standard business hours. And let's not forget that 8 Lily Street is surrounded by residential Zone 1 homes and parkland. The applicant, or the proposal, gives the applicant the power to open and close the 4-metre roller door with chain up to 9 p.m, 7 days a week. And residents have to contend with people, movement and noise external of the building up to 9 p.m, 7 days a week. Their proposal states, and I quote, that the hours of operation do not encroach into sensitive sleep times, i.e. not after 10 p.m. Residents are made up of young families putting their children to bed at 7:30 p.m. and the elderly who go to bed at 8 p.m. This is a local area. We believe it is unreasonable that residents have to unfairly modify their lives to accommodate this business. We believe this plan has a lack of consideration for the local residents, and a more suitable location should be found or more reasonable conditions put in place, as we've detailed in our email sent to councillors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dario. Is Santo Mazzo here? No? Okay, Paul Lewis on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening, councillors. First off, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight on behalf of my client. My name is Paul Lewis. I'm a senior town planner with Track Consultants. We're the town planners for the application. Firstly, my client is very much appreciative of council's assessment of the application today and the collaborative process that we feel the application's gone through so far. We're also appreciative of the contributions made by community members and their submissions to the application. My client understands the need for compromise with regard to the application, specifically with respect to the hours of operation, which have been addressed above. My client is also deeply committed to providing extensive noise attenuation and soundproofing for the recording studio use, which goes far and above what's required under the planning scheme and under the EPA requirements. With that said, further compromise in terms of the hours of operation or the number of visitors or staff who could use the site at any one time would represent a significant impact on the viability of the business and may impact on whether or not it could possibly go ahead. Effectively, this would mean a community-based, up-and-coming, small creative and cultural enterprise could be lost to the municipality, with the vacant auto repair warehouse still in place. We feel that this is entirely inconsistent with the City of Moreland's planning objectives when it comes to creative and cultural infrastructure. I'll keep things brief. Tonight, we're not requesting any changes to the conditions as proposed. We simply request that the councillors follow the motion that was put forward in council's recommendations to issue the permit as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillors, are there any questions for the applicant?
Hi, thanks very much for explaining all of that.
Councillor
I might
Bolton,
take
yeah.
this off so people can hear. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the roller door, if the acoustic report gives consideration to the roller door. I'm not sure if it normally does, apart from car stackers. I'm not sure, because I think that is possibly one possible noise problem for residents, and if that can be included in the acoustic report.
Sure. I think that's something that we could certainly include as a condition for the acoustic report, for that to be addressed by the acousticians. We've also noted that Council's officer recommendation has regard to loading and unloading. Particularly, we note that the roller door is typically only to be used for the loading and unloading of any equipment that's required. The applicants really made consideration of how often potential users of the studios would be required to bring in their own equipment. They've made substantial provision for the use of instruments to be stored on site, so we don't consider this to be happening particularly regularly. I think I'd also note that within a residential area, it's rather likely that residents may have roller doors or garage doors, which there'd be no restrictions on using in any event. But it's certainly something we'd be happy to address via a revised acoustic report.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
I was wondering if the applicant might be open to a condition where the roller door or unloading shouldn't happen outside the 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. hours. I mean, I'm just trying to visualise how the business would operate and so forth, so I don't know if that's unrealistic or not.
It's something I could discuss with them. I'm just thinking of the operation. I'll take that as a yes. Yeah, we'd be happy to resolve that by condition. Are there any further questions?
Thank you, Paul. If there are no further questions, do I have a motion from councillors?
Could your amended one?
I'm happy to move the officer recommendations as read.
I'm happy to second.
Would you want to just move, because if the amendments are acceptable to the applicant, do you want to just move the motion with amendments right away?
Yeah, let's do that. Councillor Bolton.
So my amendments, sorry, I've just sent them through so late. So to amend condition 4, so that the playing and recording of live music and add in the words and loading and unloading must occur only between the following hours of Monday to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it's really adding in the words loading and unloading there. Then to amend condition 6, add at the end of point 6, the acoustic report should include the operation of the roller doors. Then amend condition 19C to read, this is addressing the issue of which areas loading and unloading occurs, to read the area set aside for the parking of vehicles and access lanes shown on the endorsed plan must be to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. A, be completed prior to the commencement of the use. B, be maintained. C, have the boundaries of all vehicle parking spaces and loading bay clearly marked on the ground to accord with the endorsed plans. And then D, not to be used for any other purpose other than the parking of vehicles. So that it's sort of really defined loading.
Okay. I'll just ask the applicant, would you be satisfied with those?
We would be satisfied with those conditions.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, then I'm happy to incorporate them into the substantive.
Great, thank you. Councillor Davison, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'm really pleased that you've been able to mediate an agreement. I think at the planning information discussion work day that you had, it was lovely to see that you listened to residents' concerns about the times of operation, and you were able to, I think it's a opportunity to explain your art and your music and what you intend to do in that space, and I think you've done that very well. So I'm very happy to support the application as it stands, and hope that you can make some great music.
Great. It'll be my clients assisting with the music, not myself.
Okay,
which
right,
I think is probably everyone's benefit. But yeah, I think they're on their behalf really excited to become a member of a really lovely community.
Thanks. We'll just not have discussion. Sorry. Councillor Tapinos, did you wish to?
No, I think it's all been said.
Thank you. Councillor Pulford, did you
Sorry,
wish
the other thing I just wanted to add as well, there's another level of observation that council has put onto this as well. So they've got the acoustic report that's being done, and then I believe after 2 months of the business functioning, there's another report that's obtained. So there's these different levels of checks and balances along the way to alleviate residents' concerns as they move forward.
Councillor Pulford, did you wish to speak?
I'll just be quick.
Please speak. Take your mask off.
Yes, sorry. I'll just be quick. Speaking in support of this application, I think it's been great to see. I was at the planning information discussion meeting. Great to see discussion and consideration of residents' concerns by the applicants, as Councillor Davidson said. Also, just by incorporating the amendments tonight around the roller door. I think that it's an interesting use of space, and I think during the discussion of the planning information discussion meeting, highlighting the difference between a rehearsal studio and a recording studio made me feel, I guess, quite easy with this application too, and noting that if they're going to be recording music, actually sound can't come in because you can't have the sound of a jet, on the sound of a track if a plane's going overhead. So noting the difference between rehearsal and recording too, I think I'm very happy to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Pulford. Councillor Bolton, did you wish to say something
Something
quickly?
really brief. I'm very pleased the applicant's happy to accept some amended conditions it might not go as far as the residents really want, but there does have to be some give and take, especially like say certain blue collar workers who might start work, like construction workers, warehouse workers at 5 or 6 in the morning, tend to go to bed at 9 p.m. Much earlier than other white collar workers who might be able to sleep in a bit. So like I think all of that has to be sort of taken into account. So I'm glad the applicant's been prepared to accept the reduction in operating hours to, because I also think it is great having something like this, and there are some uses that this land could be put to which would be much more problematic for residents. So, and I'm glad you're accepting the aspect of the roller door, because I think that, for, shift workers and so forth, I mean, that can be very problematic, maybe once in a blue moon, but, if it was regular, I've got no idea how many people will be likely to be on site on the Sundays and so forth. But I think it's is good compromise all around, and I think, it's actually great use, I think, if providing we can accommodate
Thank
the
you.
neighbours and so forth.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. I'll now invite Mark to outline the next steps.
Thank you, councillors. The councillors have resolved to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit as amended tonight's meeting. That notice will be sent to all objectors and the permit applicant. The objectors have a 28-day period to lodge any reviews at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, and the permit applicant has 60 days to lodge an appeal against any conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That concludes our meeting for this evening. So I'll close the meeting at 7:35 p.m. and thank you, councillors, for attending.